Okay, good. So, shall we start? Yes.
Mm.
So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. So, just before we start, if you have any questions, please add them to the Q&A panel, and we'll save about 10 minutes at the end of the session just for that, right? So, to get back to the matter at hand, we're asking a simple question today. Can AI build effective learning content? So we know that AI can generate outlines now, lessons, activities, and quizzes very quickly. But speed alone does not answer the most important question, which is the content actually good enough to use? And that is what today's conversation is about. So how learning teams can move from fast generation to trusted, effective, learner-ready content, right? But before we dive in, a quick word about GT for anyone who's new to us. So, Gutenberg Technology is an LCMS built for publishers and e-learning providers, covering everything from single source authoring to collaborative content management and distribution. All this grounded in learning science and enabled by AI. And we'll share our contact information as well at the end if you'd like to learn more or see a demo, but that's not what today is about. Today, so is a working conversation, not a product presentation. We're here to dig into what it really takes to make AI-generated learning content trustworthy, effective, and ready to support learners. And for that, I'm joined today by three colleagues from GT. Rob Thomas, Director of Professional Services, who will bring the publishing, professional services, and implementation perspective. Simo Boaziz, Head of AI Engineering. He will bring the AI and agentic workflow perspective. And also Greg Chaput, Director of Learning Design Innovation, and he will bring the learning design and quality framework perspective. So thank you, guys. And let's start with what this looks like in real publishing and learning workflows. So, Rob, I'd like to start with you as you are on the front lines with publishers daily. From what you're seeing with publishers and learning organizations, what has changed now that AI-generated learning content has become so easy to produce?
Yeah. As you mentioned, velocity is probably the most obvious benefit that AI has brought to publication and content creation in general. But that speed has also exposed for publishers and learning designers uh, a massive problem in the pipeline, and that is validation. Right. So at the end point where we've got review, where we've got proofreading, where we've got editorial alignment, now there's an incredible amount of content that needs to be validated and needs to be reviewed. So our learning designers are being asked questions not only about the form of what's being created and does this create engaging content, but also is it accurate? Is it aligned? Our SMEs are being pulled into more of a proofreading and sort of a lower value level as we're checking AI not only for is it grammatically correct, but we're checking it for did you hallucinate? Is this factually correct? What kind of chasing do we have to be doing with the AI content? And so that's shifted from can we produce this? The answer is ubiquitously yes, at speed, at scale, faster. The question is now, can we trust what's been made? And is it authentic for learners? Is it useful for delivering the information? Is it something that can be understood by a person who does not have the context that the AI had when it generated it?
Hmm.
So some of the questions that we were finding organizations asking is it factually sound? Is it pedagogically aligned? Does it genuinely support the intended learning outcomes? Um, and AI doesn't eliminate work in that way. What it's done is it's deferred the validation work toward the end of the pipeline that used to be done at the beginning in the manuscripting phases.
That's really useful as a starting point, but because it shifts the conversation away from AI as a pure productivity tool and toward the real operational question, which could be what happens after the content is generated, right? So where does this show up most clearly in real production workflows?
Yeah. So this review burden overwhelmingly shows up in the way that we're using our people through the workflow. So we've got learning designers, SMEs, and QA that are reviewing work, but also reviewing the usability of the work by an organizational implementation of here we've put AI in and we've replaced our manuscripting phase or we've replaced some of our blueprinting phase. Organizations are introducing new content debt because the workflow hasn't adapted or the people haven't been trained on seeing what it is that AI is bringing and where are those AI isms. And so we're starting to see content that is identified by the market. This sounds like AI, and so it starts to get
Mm.
some users ignoring it, some users skipping past it. The value when it sounds like and it's treated like, oh, this isn't relevant. Those kind of mistakes show up very clearly and reduce the trust of the brand that provided it. And so, one of the traps is if we're measuring only by productivity of getting content into hands, we're missing the true cost of ownership and the true cost of quality ownership. So, we have to stop treating validation downstream as just a cleanup problem. Quality has to move to the AI implementation stage.
So the market problem is not just generation. So it is trust, review, and validation. So, and that brings us to the AI workflow itself. So before we get into what agentic AI can do, I think it's worth stepping back for a moment. And when people hear AI for course generation, course creation, they often picture one thing, type a prompt and get a course. But not all AI systems are built the same way, right? So there are meaningfully different approaches to how you design an AI workflow, and those design choices have a real impact on what the system can actually produce. So Simo, I would like to turn to you to can you help us understand what distinguishes agentic AI from simpler generation approaches and why that distinction matters for learning content specifically. You're muted, Sim.
Yeah, sorry for that. So yeah, the term agentic has been used kind of widely these days, and it can mean a lot of things. But what I'm trying to do here is to explain it from an engineering point of view. What exactly does it mean, and how is it different from single prompting or one-shot prompting AI systems? So to get better results with AI, you may be tempted to reach for something more powerful, bigger, smarter model using more context, bigger prompts or stuff like this. But agentic is actually quite the opposite of that. It's not hard to see why one big prompt is for a powerful model doesn't and will not yield good results. We're asking the model in one inference pass to hold the problem, all the knowledge needed to solve that problem, and also how to solve it, all the instruction and whatnot. And as a reminder, the model has no memory, it's stateless. So all this stuff has to be baked in every time you ask the model to do something. So it has to compress all this information, which is not trivial for complex tasks. It can get quite bulky and quite big, and the model has to reason through all of that. As a consequence, the responses, as many have noticed, I guess, slightly get underweighted because the model is not thinking in a sequential way. It's pattern matching across all data at once. It's jumping from one place to another under heavy load, of course, because it has to keep all that memory in its state. So, as an expert in your domain, you can see that the quality is slowly drifting, but you won't know why. There's no way of knowing why. You can't really debug an LLM. It's a black box, and the research is still struggling with the observability problem within the model. So the agentic really in the engineering terms was born out of necessity to solve these problems. And it's not really a novel engineering paradigm. We have solved these problems before. specifically in system design and distributed systems. So the core idea is to never ask units of work to handle more than it should. You should split the work smartly, and this applies to cognition as much as it does to
Mm.
computation. So
Mhm.
what agentic actually means here, underneath the term, is it's that the model is not doing more, but it's the deliberate narrowing of the unit of work. Yeah.
So that distinction is helpful because it makes agentic AI feel less like a buzzword and more like a different way of structuring the work. Um, but why is agentic better suited to learning content, for instance, than one prompt generation?
Yeah, well, first there is the context problem that is very much true in learning content. So designing, creating a course requires a lot of upfront knowledge and context, which the model will not treat as equally salient, as equally important. The attention shape of the model will degrade over distance. The longer it takes in context, the more it takes in of that context, and the more it reasons through it, it will lose its shape. The attention will not be as powerful as in the edges or in the middle. It will shift and it will lose its shape. We have seen this again firsthand with longer content when we try to generate longer content. So as a consequence, even though the course may come out as complete, the quality and instructions the expert try to enforce are either ignored or not fully included or missing something, and again without any systematic way of knowing why. You may be again tempted to write longer prompts to fix this, but it will not fix it. It will actually add to it. The attention degradation will get worse because you're adding more elements that compete with each other. So the actual fix, as explained before, is structural. Each agent gets the exact element it will need to make a decision. Figuring out what agents you need, what each agent requires as context, and the proper way to serve that context in time and shape, what we call information topology, is the architecture work that needs to be figured out before you design any AI system. The
Mm.
second challenge, which is something that Rob has spoken about very clearly, is the evaluation problem, which we should not confuse with tracing or logging. Since we can debug a black box, we have no way of telling what went wrong at each step. So that's the problem of single end-to-end generation. It's that by the time you're looking at the output, the finished product, every structural decision is already baked in and entangled with one another. And you often can't tell when it went wrong because nothing in the process indicates which step is responsible for which decision.
Mm.
Agentic solves that in a brilliant way. Every step is small and scoped, and it produces an artifact you can actually evaluate the moment you see using your evaluation criteria before you move on to the next stage. So with these 2 points, you get the operating principle that works. Constrain what the model is responsible for at every step, and you get better quality, faster iteration, and a lower cost all at the same time and not as a trade-off.
Very interesting. So as I understand this, so agentic AI is producing something which can be more complete than teams have come to expect. But that raises an important question about where human expertise still fits. As AI generates more complete content, does human review become less important, or does the role actually shift, so to speak?
The role actually really shifts, and the human review is actually more important now than ever because it's elevated through the agentic system. All the system can do is enforce the criteria that an expert have made. Human expertise belongs at the higher level of what quality is and what it should look like. The system enforces whatever you give it. If you give it wrong criteria and a wrong idea of what quality should be, it will scale that and augment that all the way around through all the system. So, getting sharp criteria and sound judgment from experts who actually understand learning is how you get consistent enforcement of high standards at scale.
Mm.
Yeah. And I'll jump in as well. What that often means for these workflows is an upskilling and elevating our experts, not just to where the content sits and as they review that content, but having an awareness that what they're reviewing is reducing that minimum of content debt that the AI is creating. So by giving the AI, and I know Simo said we don't want to add longer prompts in order to solve this, but we do want to add the context that's needed. So one of the methods that is easy to add and excellent for teams to be doing is to say, here's an example of something that is far off topic or under the paradigm that we want to deliver. Here's an example of something that is here, and have both examples fed into the agent and all of your annotations about this is what's needed in order to bring that. So you've got the explanation of why this is here so that the agent's context is your reasoning context and the context that you're able to generate and continually improve to reduce those off-topic responses or those off-target responses, and at the same time increase the trust of what the AI is able to generate as it goes through these. So we're elevating our experts. We're bringing the end point back to the beginning. We're continually or create continual paths of here's the feedback, and that feedback means this, and we give that to the engineer in order to implement how do we incorporate that feedback going forward. So we're able to upskill and manage changing our teams to elevated experts who are partners in reducing the overall review load of the workflow.
Mm. So that's an important clarification. Thank you. That the human role doesn't disappear then. It becomes more focused on the criteria, the judgment, and the standards the system should enforce, right? Preparing stuff and also troubleshooting and so on. So designing the learning design system. Um, and speaking about the learning design system, Greg, does an agentic AI workflow actually map onto how a learning design already works? Or is it a fundamentally different way of thinking about course creation?
Uh, sure. So, my experience in working with our engineers on designing our agentic workflow is that it's not a new way of thinking. What I found is there's actually an opportunity to with agentic AI to build AI that mirrors processes that learning designers already know and trust. So as a learning designer, I don't produce a finished course in one pass, right? We follow a staged methodology like ADDIE, analyze, design, develop, implement, evaluate, where each stage informs the next stage, and there are roles, there are stages and handoffs. And our agentic AI works much the same way a real learning design team works. We've created specialized agents that take on familiar roles like a project manager who coordinates the work, a SME agent who reviews source articles to find key topics and examples. We have an outline agent that drafts the learning objectives and outline, a content developer that drafts page content, a reviewer agent that evaluates the draft against a rubric. Um, these are familiar roles, and these agents also work in familiar stages. So there's a needs assessment stage, an outlining stage, a content review or a content generation stage, a review stage. And then at each stage, there's an opportunity to produce a design deliverable that you could inspect. Um, Whether it's like a project requirements overview or a set of learning objectives, a project outline. Um, so as Simo said earlier, like the payoff is transparency. I can see how the sausage is made. Instead of everything sort of coming out in one big pass or going in and out in one big pass, you get a set of deliverables you can review along the way, just like in a human-led process. And then it's also familiar. In my experience, we've taken a proven structured design methodology that learning designers know already and we know works, and we've created an AI workflow that mirrors it.
So
Um,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, one other thing though, just about kind of echoing what what Rob and Simo were saying. I found that my role with working with the agentic workflow has shifted, or it shifts where my energy goes as a learning designer. I think it shifted in an exciting direction. So I'm spending less time building components and more time creating and authoring the rules, the criteria, the vision that shapes what the system produces. It turns me into more of an architect working with my little team of AI builders. And it's work I find I enjoy and I find it fulfilling. But it is definitely a shift in what my role has meant at GT. And I'd be curious from other learning designers to hear if their roles are shifting in in a similar way as they start to use AI.
Yes, I see. So, what I wanted to ask you is that so if agentic AI can be designed to mirror the structured thinking of a learning designer, let's look at what that means in practice, starting with the content itself. So, what are the most common issues you're seeing with AI-generated learning content, and what does genuinely effective content actually look like?
Uh, Great questions. So AI, I think anybody who has been working with AI generated content will know that AI is strongest right now at the component level. So it can generate a quiz, it can write explanations and feedback, create short blocks of content that read reasonably well. At the component level, there is this sort of strength and consistency, but the problems start to appear when you start compiling components into something more complex. So when you start building blocks into pages and pages into modules and modules into courses, and that's when the limitations of AI really become apparent. Um, I think anyone who's been using AI to generate learning content will recognize, the parts seem strong in isolation, but they don't add up. So some specific issues we see most often with AI generated content. I actually just read in the comments, somebody had posted a note about this. The writing style is very recognizable, and it sort of seems dead inside, right? Anybody can sort of recognize what AI, writing looks like. And that's a huge turnoff as a learner. Like I feel very distanced from content that if I recognize it immediately as being written in an AI style. Um, we're seeing issues with there's no progression or coherent structure in content. So the discrete elements and components are all there, but there's not a clear journey or learning path. The components just don't hang together. I think there's an issue with shallow coverage. So topics are introduced, but they're not explored with enough depth. The content feels very surface level. It's very superficial feeling. Um, Text heavy pages are another issue. So you see a lot of sort of paragraph driven content, not enough interaction. The AI is producing read only experiences that are very passive, in nature. Where interactions are used, they tend to be repetitive and formulaic. So you see the same drag and drop interactions at the same point on every page used in the same way, or the same flip cards in the same location. So the use of interactivity feels predictable to me. And it shows little of the creativity you'd get from human designers. There are also missing openers and closers, so you don't see sort of solid framing at the start of a lesson or synthesis at the ends of lessons. It doesn't sort of handle the bigger picture in that way well. And also, there's not a great support now for longer form course design. So most AI systems are generating sort of one module at a time. They can handle micro learning, but connecting multiple modules into a coherent course level experience is not something the current tools are managing well.
Well, so after all the current issues you've mentioned, I think that's a good moment to separate content that simply exists from content that is actually designed to support learning, right? So
Mhm.
what does, after all this, so what does good actually look like?
It's another great question. So at GT, we've asked ourselves this question for a lot longer than AI content has been a topic. So our work on this, predates AI, the AI conversation entirely. And what we've come up with is a framework for what defining what good means in practice. And we call it the four learning design pillars. David, if you could pull that slide up, great. So we'll be sharing our four pillars resource after the session, and it also comes with an accompanying rubric that we'll talk about a little bit later. The four pillars is the foundation of our learning design framework, and each pillar addresses a different dimension of what makes a learning experience effective. So the first pillar on the left is clear, purposeful structure. Content needs to be well organized, broken into manageable segments, logically sequenced. Learners need to know what they're learning, why it matters, where they're headed. The second pillar is active, engaging learning content. So a course shouldn't just present information for learners to read passively. It should require them to think and respond and apply. And that means interactive activities and a meaningful use of multimedia, content that activates prior knowledge, examples that are relevant. The third pillar is continuous practice and feedback. Learning is strengthened through regular, varied practice and feedback that's immediate, specific, encouraging, that helps learners spot gaps and deepen their understanding as they go. And then the fourth pillar is simple, intuitive user experience. So if learners are spending, mental energy figuring out how to navigate the platform or use the interface, that's cognitive load that they're not spending on the content. So the UX has to also be considered, and it should be designed to reduce friction and let the learning itself take center stage. And if you can go to the next slide, yep. So underpinning each of the four pillars in our framework is a set of specific research-backed learning design principles. So there are 70 principles in total. This slide is not showing all 70; it's just a portion of them. And these learning design principles are drawn from instructional design, from educational psychology, and when you drill into any one of the pillars, you'll find a cluster of principles that define what good practice looks like at this detail level. So if you look at sort of the first pillar, clear, purposeful structure, for example, there are principles that like logical sequencing, hierarchical page layouts, clear and measurable learning objectives. In the second pillar, active, engaging learning content. It draws on principles about multimedia design, activity-based content, appropriate leveling. The third pillar on practice and feedback, you'll see principles about spaced practice and interleaving and low stakes practice, immediate feedback, worked examples, and then the last pillar about user experience, you'll see a sort of a wider range of principles that are more from the UX and usability world. Principles like intuitive navigation, progress and location indicators, minimalist design, viewability across screen sizes, etc. And so each pillar works the same way. There's sort of a broad design intention at the top and then a specific evidence-based criteria underneath. And our intention in developing the framework was to take this large body of learning science research and usability research and do our best to boil it down into a set of like clear, usable criteria. And we use it in a variety of contexts at GT. So it's become something of an all-purpose tool that we use to keep ourselves honest. Guiding how our AI generates content to evaluating content, or AI generated content to designing features in our learning system.
Mhm. So that framework gives us a much more concrete way to talk about quality, beyond just saying that something feels strong or weak. So How does having a clear framework like this change that what teams should be looking for when they review AI generated content?
So yeah, I think you just nailed it, which is it gives having a framework, it prompts you to ask specific and answerable questions. So, does this content have a clear, purposeful structure? Is it active and engaging? Is there meaningful, varied practice? Is the feedback targeted and encouraging, et cetera, et cetera? It's a great tool we found for evaluating AI generated content. The framework lets us name issues precisely, more precisely than we would, without the aid of a framework like this. So, for example, sort of connecting back to some of the issues we talked about with AI content earlier, it's one thing to say the content doesn't hang together or it feels disconnected, but if we can, with our framework, we can connect that issue to a specific learning design principle and a violation of a principle. So that becomes a violation of the principle of logical sequencing. Or text heavy pages, which is another issue we talked about. It violates the principle of activity based content. Repetitive interactions violates the principle of varied practice. Single quiz, bolted at the end of a longer module, violates the principle of spaced continuous practice. So what it does is it gives us rather than sort of just having sort of subjective maybe feedback, it gives us a way to map our feedback to a specific principle. And this gives everyone on our team a shared and precise way to name the problem. And then it also points directly to the fix.
Mm. So this framework makes quality reviewable, so to speak. So concrete questions instead of subjective judgments. So let's look at what that evaluation process actually looks like in practice, right? So given that framework, how do learning teams actually validate that AI generated content meets that standard?
Sure. So this is where our rubric comes in. So we've developed a rubric that is based on the four pillars framework and essentially operationalizes the four pillars. Yep, if you can call that up. So we'll provide this again as a follow-up to this session, but the pillar is organized across four dimensions, and each of those dimensions is one of the four pillars in the framework. So the dimensions are structure, engagement, practice, and user experience. And if you go sort of to the top right, um, you'll see. Yeah, actually, maybe if you click to the second tab, there's an example of a filled in rubric. Yep, that one. You'll see in the top right there is that the rubric produces an overall score. So this gives us a practical decision point. Content that scores above the set bar, like 85% or 90%, let's say, is ready for production, while anything that is below it goes back for revision. So there's an overall score, which gives us that sort of readiness threshold. And then each dimension produces its own score too. So you can see exactly which of the four pillars is scoring the strongest and which are the weakest. In general, where attention is needed. And then, as you're showing here, there are 55 individual criteria that are distributed across these dimensions and organized into subcategories. And each of these criteria aligns with one or more learning design principles from the framework. So this is very connected and it's very integrated with the framework. It all sort of works as one system. So for each of the criteria, you're prompted to make an evaluation and add a comment with your feedback. And what we found is with structuring it this way, you're capturing feedback that's very specific. It's grounded in learning design principles. It points to a fix. It's very actionable. There are a few benefits I think worth calling out. It makes revisions to AI content feel more manageable. So when you open up, I don't sure others have had this experience when you're first reviewing AI generated content, the problems feel so big, they're spread throughout, and it can feel overwhelming. And this rubric turns, that into a sort of prioritized picture of where work is needed. I think using a rubric and a framework like this makes our feedback as learning designers more persuasive. So when I make a suggestion, I can always link that suggestion to a specific learning design principle. And I think the case for revision is easier to make when you can do that because you're not only saying what needs to change, but you're able to explain why. And it's also, as a learning designer, it's also fun having sort of a bag of, learning design principles in your back pocket when you're making the case for revisions to your product colleagues or your engineering colleagues. It's been a great alignment building tool, so it surfaces patterns and it creates a shared vocabulary for describing problems. And I wanted to note too that we've developed our own version of this, but it's meant to be customizable. So it depends on what you're evaluating and how you're working. Some dimensions will matter more than others. So if you're, for example, like building content in a tool like Rise, the user experience dimension is largely determined by the tool. So you might have to downweight it or maybe set it aside entirely. And then it's also our intent is for it to be flexible across different use cases. So we've focused on AI generated content today, but it can also be used for evaluating product features or individual components or other kinds of learning products or anywhere structured learning design feedback is useful. I think it can help. We'd love to hear how you might end up using it.
Very interesting. So I've also been using this rubric to assess some modules with our clients in France. So for practitioners watching this session, I mean learning designers, instructional designers, content leads, I want to address a question you might be sitting with, which is, does all of this make your expertise less relevant? So what I'm hearing from our panelists is the opposite, quite the opposite. The expertise doesn't go away, it moves, it shifts. So the judgments, calls, the quality bar, the standards, those still require a human, right? So what's changing is where in the workflow that expertise gets applied and what it means to apply it consistently and also at scale. So that also connects back to the AI workflow. So if the rubric tells us what quality looks like, then the next question is whether the AI workflow can use those criteria earlier in the process, really earlier in the process. So back to SIMO. So what would be interesting? So can the agentic workflow actually use those quality criteria during generation, sorry, or is the rubric purely a tool for human review?
Well, the rubric was actually built for the agentic workflow because what you have to look at what the rubric actually is. What the rubric is the learning design judgment and expertise made explicit. Like most experienced learning designers, like Greg here, they carry a sophisticated intuition, but that intuition alone is not executable for AI or for any system. You can't run intuition at scale. So the learning designers, what they did is they took that judgment and turned it into specific weighted criteria across multiple dimensions, as Greg has shown in that Excel sheet. And that's how the rubric was made, and that's why it was made. A lot of work was made into it, and it works fine. Now the rubric alone, as it stands, has a gap. Like words like in depth, minimal, and all the adjectives you may use to describe a section or a title or some piece of content, they have precise meanings to the person who wrote them because they have examples in their head. They have that image, that paradigm, that vision. They don't have a precise meaning to anyone else reading the rubric for the first time. And they definitely don't have any meaning for AI. It has to guess what that word means. So the second step we did, and as a complementary to this rubric, is to deliberately generate multiple courses spanning the full quality range. from production ready to incomplete, broken, or slightly off across one dimension or multiple dimensions. And we made sure to actually annotate them, human annotations, not just score them. The annotations explain why a score was given, or why a good score was given and why a bad score was given. That's a training set. It's exactly what you need to build what we call an LLM as a judge. That's a term you might have heard before, and that's a model that can read a course segment, apply the rubric the way a learning designer would, and this actually closes the loop with the agentic architecture. And an LLM as a judge who is trained on expert annotated rubric evaluation can run actually at every step of generation, not at the very end against the finished course. So the learning design expertise does not disappear into the pipeline. It rather becomes the standard that the pipeline enforces at every step.
So that's a powerful idea. So the rubric is not only a review tool at the end of the process, and it can become part of the workflow itself if the criteria are clear enough. So so now we have the full picture, right? So the market is asking for faster content. AI can generate it. Learning teams have to validate it, and the rubric gives us a way to measure it, right? So I want to get back to Rob, and let's bring this back to production and ROI. So what does all of this mean for production and ROI, and what should organizations do now?
Yeah. Yeah. With your return on investment for implementing AI, as we mentioned before, it's tempting to try to measure success by how fast you can get through the drafting phase. But the real metric for measuring that is how much trusted learner-ready content can you actually deploy without needing any rework. And so your review burden is where the line item that reduces. So the cost doesn't disappear, it jumped to a different line item. And so by taking that measurement, how much can we trust? What are our reviews? Are we iterating? And how are we bringing, as we mentioned before, how are we bringing the expertise of our gatekeeping review up into the systematic approach and the way that our agents are leveraging this? We're bringing those down. Um, so where we see those improvements and groups that are doing this at scale are solving for speed and quality simultaneously and are implementing methods of keeping continual review. Some of that looks like putting in an agent that is sort of a LLM as judge, and so you're able to get those rubric scores, the rubric that we just went through, being able to pull that rubric score up. I saw one question come through about how do we measure those rubrics against, or how well they perform against human reviewers. And it's about keeping those in sync and keeping everything aligned. So when we have our learning design team go through the same exercise we're asking the agent to go through, filling out that rubric and measuring where are we aligned, where are we not aligned. With some of the rubric items, they are subjective, and so we add explanation to the subjective aspect, right? Here is my explanation for why I gave it this score versus why I gave it that score. All of those influence and improve the way that the agents can actually make those adjustments. And by pushing our evaluation back into the workflow, we are tracking rework and we're tracking rework reduction as our cost line defined. What in a mature AI system, which nobody has, it's still too new, and Agentic is still too new to be able to say that. But what can we expect from a mature AI implementation and workflow that is leveraging both our in-house expertise and the model's ability to keep a single piece of context at a single time?
So yes, very nice, very interesting. So So here the opportunity is clear, right? So and so is the path to getting there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And before we wrap up, because yeah, it's already time. So one final question for each of you. So in one sentence, what should organization remember before they deploy AI generated learning content? Um, Greg, for instance.
Sorry, unmuting. Um, I think as a learning designer, my answer would be to ensure that, content and anything that you build as a learning designer aligns with some kind of framework that is connected to evidence-based learning design principles. Whether that's a framework like what we've developed or something else. A framework to guide you through the process is critical.
Yes, framework is key. Yes. Thank you. Simon, want to go next?
Yeah, so from where things stand today in the industry, I would say that the model is the least interesting part of the problem today. Like the criteria and judgment matter more than the architecture, and the architecture matters more than the model. So you should build in that order.
Hmm. This is a great insight. Yes. And Rob, maybe you have something to add?
Yeah, I'll say again sort of the points I've been putting forward, but AI increases your product value only when faster content is matched with reliable validation and a lower review burden.
Yeah, faster is not the key to all this, right? Fast only is not the key. So thank you, thank you. So three good ways to remember that what we've covered today. So thank you all. We have about 10 minutes for questions. So let's open it up. If you have a question for any of our panelists, now is the time. I've seen that we have already 5 questions that found answers. And we have 2 left, right? So what steps do you take to check for bias from multiple angles and at different steps in your workflow? What kinds of bias do you check for? Maybe for Simo or Greg.
Yeah, I could start with this one. Yes, we in our agentic workflow, we've created guidance on avoiding bias that we give to the agents and that the agents check against. So that's sort of one way is we have a sort of a standard set of guidelines that our agents who are the content development agent checks against. But then also the reviewer agent, who is reviewing the generated content, also uses a similar checklist to check against it as well. And then the humans, like me and my team, at the end of the day, we also check it as well. I'm not finding in the courses that we've been building with AI with our agentic system, I'm not seeing problems. I think it depends on what your requirements are and how specific they are, and maybe you have more advanced needs than we do. But with the content that I'm seeing at the end of the day is following all of the guidance that we've put in at the beginning, to ensure sort of that it's being checked along the way.
Yeah, from an
Yeah, and
engineering perspective, just to add to that, sorry, Rob, it's what Greg is effectively saying is that you should build harnesses around your system so that
Mhm.
it keeps the bias out of the final piece, and this of course assumes that you know exactly what kinds of bias you are looking to eliminate. So that vision needs to be there before you touch AI.
Yep. And the last piece of that is you can only architect for the biases that you're aware of and seeing. So bringing in a more diverse set of reviewers and a more informed set of reviewers who can articulate the biases that your internal team maybe cannot, or maybe the AI models have not, uh, as identified. Having a workflow that takes those feedbacks and puts them back into the architecture, into the agent context, into the framework, allows you to improve and continually reduce those instances of those hidden bias pieces. But it really does come to, in order to attack something as insidious as bias, you have to attack it systematically and at every level.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. We have another question here. So the creation of a course will go a lot faster with the help of agents. Thanks to agents focusing on single tasks and with limited context, the quality could be on par with human-made courses. Still, it is a single course, a monolith. What could agents bring to the table when you want to offer a flexible learning experience? And what can be built in to accommodate differences between learners?
Mhm. I could start this one at least. The it sounds to me like this is a question about maybe adaptive learning, and can we sort of harness agents to create adaptive learning experiences, depending on the learner and their pathway through the content or their level of ability coming into the content. I think that's super interesting, and I can see a lot of potential for agents to enable adaptive experiences. That's We're not building that kind of content right now at GT, so I don't have experience with that. What I can say is that we are able with our agentic workflow to develop a wide range of sort of flexible course designs. We can support scenario-based courses and more sort of structured learning path-based courses, more exploratory-based courses. The agents system that we've set up is very responsive to following our different learning design guidance to create flexible experiences in that way. That's different from the question, I think, of adaptivity, which might be what is being asked here.
Yeah, from an engineering point of view, the adaptative learning question really depends on how well can you aggregate and collect data upfront before you enter your system about each and every learner. And that's a different problem than AI. Of course, if you can do that successfully, if you can get that data, then yeah, you can leverage the AI to build that experience. But that requires that you solve the data problem upfront, or the adaptative learning experience will remain out of reach, I guess.
So to
Yeah,
achieve this, we
I'll
need to
jump on
collect
that.
all the, sorry, to achieve this, we need to collect all the traces left by the learner in the
Mhm.
Yeah,
system. Yeah, okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, Rob, go ahead.
Um, Yeah, as far as, content production, there's really sort of two schools of thought around this. And in the question, it says it's still a single course and it's a monolith. There's not a reason why an agentic workflow cannot create multiple side-by-side outputs, multiple related outputs. So you can generate, especially when we talk about leveled learning, you can create levels from the same starting point with the same rigor, or you can adapt the single output that's sort of your here's your baseline, and up or down the levels that it's being created. You can modify either at the end point where you've got the content and it's reviewed and you're adjusting it, or you can modify at the beginning and say, I know that I will need these kind of levels, these kind of paths, these kind of adaptations, and build that into what you're asking the agents to create at the beginning.
Yeah.
So with all those outputs, you mean that the routing between all those modules and outputs would be done outside the tool in an LMS, for instance, right?
It could be, right? You could have agents in your authoring tool in your LMS that basically take, here's my lesson, and I need a leveled lesson that has more instructor material around it, or I have something that needs more assistive learning access or more interactivity here. or something that facilitates learning through another way. So you can take it from the destination. I've created this and I know that this is good and ready to publish, and then create derivatives off of that publishable. Or from the beginning, you can set the system to create the derivatives at the same time.
Hmm. Very interesting. Thank you. Do we have other questions, maybe? As I say, now is the time. I think we answered all the questions. Right, so sorry to distract from the compelling story about agentic content creation. Thanks for your answers. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. So, okay, so thank you, everyone. And thank you to Rob, Simo, and Greg for such a rich and practical conversation. The main takeaway is this, so is AI has made learning content faster to create. The next challenge is making it faster to trust, right? So that requires the right workflow, the right evaluation framework, and the right human expertise in the loop still. And also, we'll be sharing the four learning design pillars, right? Framework and the rubric with everyone who attended today. And there will also be a replay. So look out for those in your follow-up email. And if you'd like to learn more about GT or see a demo, or yeah, our contact details are on the screen right now. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you. Bye.